Well, I already pissed off the Iron Maiden fans. And you know what?
I apologize for nothing.
Today we are finally ranking the albums of Judas Priest, and we're starting with Rocka Rolla in 1974. Much like I said in my Iron Maiden ranking, this British band also got their start in much more humble rock and blues beginnings. Those only familiar with the band's more popular albums are likely to be a little perplexed, as this is much more in line with bands like Led Zeppelin. Hell, there's even a harmonica on here. The most metal comparison you could make is early Black Sabbath. As for whether it's good, I would say it's competent, but frankly, if I'm in the mood for this style, I'm much more likely to just reach for Zepp. I go to Priest for something a little bit different, but I am going to put this at good tier. They followed that up with Sad Wings of Destiny in 1976.
Never turn your back on the rip-off.
Rob definitely starting to come more into his own style with those high notes, but the instrumentation is still decidedly very classic rock. There are also a few live mainstays on this album, like Victim of Changes and The Ripper. The latter and Deceiver in particular feel like early blueprints for the true Priest sound, in my opinion. Again, solid and even a step up from the debut, but still not exactly what I'm looking for. This is also going at good tier. Then we got Sin After Sin in 1977. Rob still inching closer and closer to realizing his own potential, and I guess I might compare the sound of this one a bit more to Dio-era Sabbath with its slightly darker and heavier sound. Notably, Raw Deal has also been described as Rob's coming out and a heavy metal gay rights song. Still too many chill moments for a band I come to for headbanging, so this is also going to good, and I promise that is the last one for that tier. But now things start to get a little bit more interesting with Stained Class in 1978. This album marks the emergence of the classic band logo that they still use to this day. It's also apparently the only Judas Priest album to feature songwriting by all 5 members of the band. Great opener with Exciter, which is sometimes credited as an early inspiration for the speed metal and thrash metal sound. Then you've got other cookers on here like White Heat, Red Hot, and Invader, and then there's the more dynamic Beyond the Realms of Death. The first of theirs to break into Billboard 200 and also make many lists of the top rock and metal albums of the time. I'd argue that this is the first proper Judas Priest album, but personally it still doesn't quite scratch the itch for me as much as some of the albums to come. It's definitely a big step up though, so it is going to fantastic. Then we got Killing Machine in 1978. Continuing their journey towards full self-actualization, this is around the time that they started wearing the leather and studs stage outfits. This album also ditches some of the more fantastical elements in the lyrics, opting instead for more grounded topics. Columbia Records also initially retitled the album Hellbent for Leather for its initial US release due to feeling the original title was too violent. That is easily the best song on this album, though, in my opinion. Unfortunately, the rest feels a bit too broad to the point of being a little corny on tracks like Rock Forever, which feels more worthy of a band like Kiss. Overall, this feels like a step back to me, several in fact, so I'm putting it at okay tier. Then we got British Steel in 1980.
Breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking the law.
Max Cavalera of Sepultura and Soulfly stated British Steel is the essential thrash metal album everyone needs to hear. Rob cited touring with AC/DC as an influence on this record as well. Some all-time classics on here like Living After Midnight and arguably their best-known hit Breaking the Law. Ranked 3rd on Rolling Stone's list of 100 greatest metal albums of all time. That said, I've been vocal in saying that I think this album is a little overrated. I think that it's very good, but it's no masterpiece with some filler and a few down moments like United. They have better albums is all I'm saying. So all things considered, I'm going to put this one at great tier. Then we have Point of Entry in 1981. For this album, they flew their equipment to the Ibiza studios in Spain for a more live sound. 3 singles were produced, complete with music videos, and Heading Out to the Highway, Don't Go, and Hot Rockin'. I find this to be another significant step back for them into a more bland and generic rock sound. KK Downing has said in interviews that they were just giving the label what they wanted at the time due to pressure, but other band members have said more positive things. Personally, I could do with never listening to it again, even if it's still not like terrible bad, although All the Way is pretty embarrassing. So this one went to boring bad for me.
No, sir, I didn't like it.
They followed that up though with Screaming for Vengeance in 1982. Now this is that shit I'm looking for. The guitar tone, those big wailing harmonized leads, Rob just killing it with anthemic vocal line after anthemic vocal line, hooks upon hooks upon hooks. Incredible kickoff with the Helion going into the ripping Electric Eye. Then there's that incredibly infectious riff of Riding on the Wind and the more plodding but no less catchy Bloodstone. Pain and Pleasure feels right out of the heavy metal movie contrasted by the ripping title track. Fever, Devil's Child, frankly there's not a wasted moment on here to the degree that the standout single You've Got Another Thing Coming doesn't even rank in my top 5 in the track list. This is not only one of my favorite Judas Priest albums, it's one of my top front-to-back heavy metal albums, period. So, of course, this one has to go to perfection. Y'all, we have plenty more albums to go, but if you're enjoying the video so far, be sure to hit the like button, or if you're mad as hell, then hit the dislike button. I don't give a shit. Also, comment below, where do you agree? Where do you disagree? What are your favorites and least favorites? Let's get a conversation going down there. But we will continue on with Defenders of the Faith in 1984. Very much picking up where the last album left off with a very if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. More absolute ragers here like Jawbreaker, Freewheel Burning, and Eat Me Alive, which amusingly landed at number 3 on the PMRC's Filthy 15 due to its obscene tongue-in-cheek lyrics. As usual, great free publicity. Thanks, Tipper Gore.
Rock lyrics have turned from I can't get no satisfaction to I'm going to force you at gunpoint to eat me alive.
Based.
Also some great hard-hitting yet dynamic tracks like the Sentinel. Maybe not as good as Screaming for Vengeance, but very, very close. This one is also going to perfection. Then we got Turbo in 1986. How do you follow up some of your best material to date? Drop what will become one of your most infamous in a completely different style. As soon as those 80s synths kick off on Turbo Lover, and as if that title wasn't already a dead giveaway, we're off to glam territory. The jab back at the PMRC with Parental Guidance is kind of fun, but I feel more like I'm listening to Motley Crue or Rat. It's not unlistenable, but it's definitely cheesy and a low point for the band. I'm gonna put this one at fun bad. Like, I can re-listen to this one, even though it's not very good. And I will say that unlike Point of Entry, at least it's not boring. They followed that up with Ram It Down in 1988. Very strong opener with the title track really bringing the energy that gets your hopes up for another killer album. Unfortunately, it's kind of a trick, as there are still cornier things like Love Zone, Love You to Death, and Blood Red Skies mixed in like surprise Skittles in your bag of M&Ms. Others like Heavy Metal, I'm a Rocker, and Come and Get It are pretty strong, as they were leftovers from when this was supposed to be the heavier part of a double album with Turbo, but instead it becomes kind of a Frankenstein of ideas. Hard as Iron is also pretty fun, but there's a reason why very few of these songs get played live. It's at least better than Turbo, I would say, probably, so I'm gonna put it at okay. Then we have Painkiller in 1990. Fortunately, once more, after a serious low point, we get another career high with another instant classic. That title track has to be one of the most hype album kickoffs of all time, with that killer drum solo courtesy of new drummer Scott Travis leading into those crazy heavy riffs and vocals. What a guitar solo, too. The only downside is that the other tracks have a tough act to follow, but there are plenty more career best bangers here, like All Guns Blazing, Hell Patrol, Nightcrawler, A Touch of Evil, and of course the namesake of fellow metal YouTuber, The Metal Meltdown. The album also got a Grammy nomination for Best Metal Performance, but ultimately lost to Queen's Stone Cold Crazy, which is a great song, but not exactly metal. I still slightly prefer Screaming for Vengeance personally, but this is another one that clearly has to go to perfection. Unfortunately, Rob would leave the band for over a decade after this tour, which brings us to Jugulator in 1997.
Stop it.
Trust me, Spotify is doing you a favor by not streaming this album. Now, credit where it's due for at least staying metal, but goddamn is this a chaotic, muddled mess that is implied by the change in logo, in no way resembling the Judas Priest we know. Enter Tim Ripper Owens of Iced Earth on vocals, and frankly, I can't lay the blame at his feet. Like, yeah, he can get pretty terrible on tracks like Death Row and Abductors, but at the end of the day, Glenn wrote the lyrics and Tipton and Downing composed all the music, so again, credit where it's due. It feels like the band was listening to Korn and Pantera and said, hey, let's do that, but bad. Somehow Burn in Hell was still nominated for a Grammy, once more proving that name recognition is all that matters in a year that also brought us Horacle, Anthems to the Welkin at Dusk, and Throne Darkness Triumphant, and Something Wild. It's not the worst thing ever. I'm actually going to put it at fun bad. It's one of those albums where it's kind of like a bad movie, where you can kind of laugh at it. Then we got Demolition in 2001. So here it is, the lowest rated album on Metal Storm with a 6.4, and also the only Judas Priest studio album to actually feature a parental advisory label. Frankly, Machine Man is okay for what it is, but again, this is not Priest in any way, shape, or form. Once more, terrible production too. Everything feels way too loud to the point of almost clipping. It reminds me a lot of like the Saint Anger mix.
It was dark times, Harry, dark times.
I think what makes this album even worse than the last one is that in addition to sounding terrible, it's also just boring. Like, I can at least stupidly bang my head to Jugulator. This is just lame butt rock. It reminds me of later career Godsmack with a little Marilyn Manson in there too on tracks like Subterfuge. Like, just listen to Jekyll and Hyde.
What the hell is even that?
People like to make fun of Turbo, but frankly, this makes Turbo look like Mozart, in my opinion. It is going to boring bad. Then we have Angel of Retribution in 2005. Rob is back, hopefully to save the day. But now that said, it's not like we're jumping right back into Painkiller territory as much as I wish we were. This still has some issues. For one, the main riff on the already kind of weak Revolution is just a copy and paste from Jane's Addiction's The Mountain, which is a much better song, and that's the single on this record. Then you've still got really lame cuts like Worth Fighting For and Wheels of Fire that feel like 2000s Dave Mustaine. The only track I really enjoy here is probably Hellrider. Number 13 on Billboard and won a 2005 Metal Hammer Award for Best Album, but that feels like way too high of praise for something this mid. So this one is going to okay, and at the bottom of okay at that. Then we have Nostradamus in 2008. Now this is a double album and their first concept album, also the last with KK Downing on guitar. As the name would imply, it's about the 16th century writer, which I suppose is appropriate for their 16th record. And for all of the shit that this album gets, I think that it's at least more interesting than anything on the last album, and your enjoyment will probably hinge on whether you enjoy symphonic metal bands like Sabaton. Sure, the spoken word interludes are kind of cringe and it's way too long-winded, but I appreciate how cinematic it feels, and if Priest were going to jump genres again, this at least feels like it fits Rob's voice. Also, that title track is pretty fire. So yeah, I kind of enjoy this one. It's not a listen over and over again kind of album, but I think it's worthy of probably my spiciest take on this list by putting it at great tier above some of their older stuff here.
For nothing.
Then we got Redeemer of Souls in 2014.
Every man seeks this end.
Entering the 2010s, but for the first time without founding guitarist KK Downing, here replaced by Richie Faulkner. Lots of great guitar work here. I'm particularly fond of Halls of Valhalla and Dragonaut. That sudden pace change in the final third of Cold Blooded is pretty sick too. Feels a little lacking in energy at times, like kind of sleepy but never really boring, save for Hell and Back, which is the only real skip for me here. A little mopey and about 15 minutes too long for my taste, but solid overall, I would say. So this is also going to great tier. Then we got Firepower in 2018. Great opener with the catchy title track. It really is incredible just how great these guys all sound, especially in comparison to Iron Maiden at this point, in my opinion. Lightning Strike is another instant classic with its head bob-inducing riffs and infectious vocals. Definitely some Megadeth vibes on parts of Evil Never Dies, and I like the malevolent energy and killer chorus of Necromancer. Nice slower groove to Children of the Sun, an epic atmosphere on Rising from Ruins. Traitor's Gate is another standout that feels right out of the classic era of heavy metal. This album hit number 5 on the Billboard 200 chart, making it the band's highest charting album in the US. Great example of not having to settle for mediocrity when it comes to legacy acts. They should have to work for it just as hard as anyone else, and they put in the work here. So for that reason, this is easily going to fantastic. Seriously, I'm so tired of seeing comments like on the Metallica ranking where it's like, we're lucky we just got an album, as if it doesn't matter what quality it is. But that brings us to Invincible Shield in 2024. Honestly, I had no feelings initially about a new Judas Priest album at this point, but then they dropped the opening track, Panic Attack, and I got pretty hyped. I'd go so far to say that between the killer riffs, overall speed, and incredibly infectious chorus, I would put this in their best singles alongside the likes of Painkiller. And that hype held for the other singles as well, with Trial by Fire and The Serpent and the King, likewise showcasing all of my favorite elements of this band's peak era, and Crown of Horns also demonstrating some variety with a pretty catchy ballad. Honestly, if someone had told me that these were old unreleased songs from the 80s, I would have totally believed it. And with a 72-year-old Rob Halford still hitting every high note like he's still in his 20s. Getting into the deeper cuts, the title track is the longest one here at nearly 6.5 minutes, and they make every second a blast with more fun earworm hooks and solid dynamics. Devil in Disguise and Gates of Hell are also slower cuts, with the former giving a groovy kind of hair metal vibe, and the latter actually giving me a little AC/DC meets Dio energy. Then there's the chugging banger of an anthem, As God Is My Witness. Escape from Reality has a little proggy vibe to it, and Sons of Thunder, another mid-paced head bobber not unlike Breaking the Law. And not counting the bonus tracks, closing on a Lighters in the Air moment with the also anthemic stomp of Giants in the Sky. Now, do I love every song? No. But I'd say that even my least favorite song on this album is like a 7.5 out of 10, and most of them are at least an 8. Combine that with some new instant classics, and I'd say that this is another one of their best albums front to back. Like, there's no point where I actually feel like hitting the skip button. I had a fun time all the way through, listening to it multiple times, and so, for that reason, this one is also going to fantastic. Y'all check out this video if you still have not watched my anger-inducing Iron Maiden ranking, or this one for something different. Also subscribe if you're new here, because I put out videos like this all the time on all sorts of genres. I do a lot of death metal, but also plenty of other things too. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.